Yo, 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 what's up, all you burners, stoners, and potheads out there? This is Weedman 420 with the Weedman 420 Chronicles. How are all you vipers doing out there? Mrs. Weedman?
Mr. Weedman?
How the hell are you?
Wonderful.
That sounds great.
Wonderful with a side of anxious.
We go to go see our kiddos and our grandkid doggy and kitty cat for Christmas for the holiday season.
So, yeah. So I've got like 50 gazillion things to do in a very brief amount of time. But the most important thing is right now. I'm right here, right now.
In this moment.
So
why don't you light up that bowl and get in the moment even more?
I'm going to get in the moment even more. My eyes are blurry tonight. I'm slightly anxious tonight. So I'm going to do a little mood adjustment right now. What am I smoking, Mr.
Majin Fujita.
Sweet. All right.
We do love the Majin Fujita out there, everyone. Hope everybody out there in the world is doing great. We love you out there. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the DMs I've been getting from people all over the place. A friend of Australia that I talked about in the last episode sent me some cute pictures of his dog. Brand new dog he just got back in September. He or she is a cutie. I think it's a he said so. But thanks, my friend in Australia. I appreciate you sending me some pics of your pup and the weed that you're smoking. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it when you send me DMs and pics of the weed you're smoking out there in the world of weed. So thank you all. I'm going to smoke real quick while Mrs. Weedman.
Tonight might be a two-hitter show. I've been laying low and doing like one hit when we do the show because I find it's a little hard for me to read aloud. But tonight might require a second hit.
Before I take this hit, though, and we're going to talk about this in international news, but this specific hit Mr. Weedman's going to take is for fucking Malta. Malta!
Go Malta.
Love you out there, Malta. I'll talk about international news, but this specific hit is from Weedman 420 Chronicles to you. Thank you, Malta. Go ahead, Mrs. Weedman.
Well, I know everybody's probably getting ready for some sort of holiday festivities. There is Hanukkah happening, right? We're in the middle of that.
I think Hanukkah's over.
Is it done? Christmas.
Kwanzaa.
Any other holidays, and maybe you don't celebrate a holiday and it's just a regular day.
We still love you all out there. We still love you.
And if you're in the midst of the holiday chaos, smoke some more weed. It'll make you feel better.
Oh, yeah. Smoke.
Helps.
It does.
Don't smoke and drive. It's the mom in me. I can't help it. All right.
You ready to get the show started?
Yep.
Let's get going. About 10 days ago, I read an article from the Chicago Sun-Times, and I didn't talk about it on the last episode because I wasn't ready to yet. I wanted to read it a couple more times. It's a very long article. It was written by Stephanie Zimmerman and Tom Schuba, and it says, "What in Illinois? Legal weed. Sometimes contaminants, sometimes testing fines." So let's get into this. A little bit long. Stick with me here. What in that joint you picked up at your local legal weed shop? In some cases, contaminants like mold and yeast at levels that exceed state safety standards. That's what lab tests commissioned by the Chicago Sun-Times found. And that was for pre-rolls for which cannabis in them had passed muster in state-mandated tests done for growers. It's been nearly 2 years and $1.9 billion in sales since recreational cannabis was legalized in Illinois. And the state has some of the strictest testing standards for cannabis in the nation. Yet, consumers still can't be certain that their heavily taxed legal weed they buy from state-licensed dispensaries is free from excessive levels of contaminants such as mold, yeast, bacteria, the Sun-Times found. Dun, dun, dun. And in 2 of the 10 samples tested, the weed's potency was found to be far less than advertised, meaning consumers wouldn't be getting the high they paid for. Dun, dun, dun. The Sun-Times commissioned an independent state-registered laboratory to test the sampling of one of the most popular recreational cannabis products, pre-rolled joints. That testing found that 8 of the 9 pre-rolled cannabis joints purchased by Sun-Times reporters from Chicago area dispensaries contain levels of mold, yeast, or various types. Oh, I lost my spot, everybody. I'm sorry. And various types of contaminants. The Sun-Times commissioned Origo Labs, friends of ours. So just so you know who they used. That's even though the weed in those pre-rolled joints have been given a clean bill of health after harvest in the state required testing done by cultivators. Though the test results were a form of small sampling, they mirror the findings of testing that's been done in other states that found moldy weed for sale to consumers. Ooh. Am I surprised by these results? Absolutely not, says James McRae, owner of the Straight Line Analytic Cannabis Consulting Firm near Seattle. Haha. McRae says he found widespread mold in pre-rolls during his own sampling and testing for a dispensary's client in Washington State in 2019. Cultivators say they aren't to blame. The cannabis they grew and sold that went into the pre-rolls was fine when it was initially tested soon after the harvest, and that any contamination must have occurred at some point after that. Calling safety and quality top priorities, Pam Altoff, executive director of the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, says the industry group will continue to work with regulators and other key stakeholders on the continued development of testing standards to ensure consumers are protected and continue to enjoy the highest quality products. This isn't the first time problems have been found in products on dispensary shelves in Illinois. After getting complaints about mold in May, Illinois regulators flagged 6 batches of Mag Landrace cannabis flower, the dried plant material that users smoke, produced at Verona Holdings at Araxa Cultivation Center in downstate Albion. The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulations told dispensaries statewide to quarantine the products, but the state agency left it up to each store to decide whether to inform consumers who already had bought the weed. One dispensary chain notified customers and offered store credits. Good for them. Illinois rules for cannabis safety and quality required cannabis that's grown and sold in the state to pass tests for mold, yeast, bacteria, and other contaminants that are much stricter than those in many states. Some states don't require any testing at all for certain contaminants. State regulators largely rely on private testing paid for by the cultivators. The labs that cultivators hired to test the cannabis that ended up in the contaminated pre-rolls purchased by the Sun-Times stand by their own test results, saying the weed met standards when they tested it, which was before it was processed and rolled into joints. The tests commissioned by the Sun-Times can't explain how or where and when the samples became contaminated, only that they were. Experts say that could have happened during processing, transport, or even while sitting in a dispensary waiting to be sold. McRae, the cannabis consulting firm owner, says pre-rolled joints are especially susceptible to becoming contaminated. That's a bummer, because I like buying pre-rolls, especially when you're on the go and if you're out and you didn't come home to roll your own pre-roll, and you run to a dispensary real quick. It's depressing. He calls such products rolled mold, as suspects that the rolling processes causes the contamination. The chunks of cannabis flower that go into the joints might pass all tests after harvest, McRae says, but when the flower is ground up to make pre-rolls, he says, the distributed plant material releases moisture, and the process mixes in naturally occurring mold spores that are in the air all around us. Then, after being wrapped in rolling paper and sealed in airtight package, the pre-rolls are shipped by truck and can sit on a store shelf for months before being bought and consumed, he says. It was okay when it was tested, but now you're testing the stuff when it's been on the store shelves, McRae says of the Sun-Times testing. The thing is, when you are testing represents what consumers are buying, so that is a problem. Smoking moldy weed can cause allergic reactions and bring on asthma for people who have a cold or another infection, says Dr. Enid Nupton, a Johns Hopkins University Medical School professor and former co-chair of the American Thoracic Society Tobacco Action Committee. Common symptoms include cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, and airway inflammation. And people who are immune compromised because they take certain types of medications can have a rheumatological disorder or have received an organ transplant, among other reasons, can become seriously ill, Neptune says. They run the risk of being exposed to mold and potentially getting a very serious infection, she says. Sang Huck Park, a senior scientist at Colorado State University Institute of Cannabis Research, who's delved into the health effects of mold-contaminated weed, says a person might experience coughing, nausea, and vomiting. It should not be dangerous if the event is a one-time event, but if it becomes occasional, it will raise numerous health issues. If the person is allergic to mold, the person could experience a serious allergic inflammation chain reaction. Illinois cannabis companies whose legal weed end up in the pre-rolls that the Sun-Times tested say they have full confidence in their products. David Speckerman, vice president of Verano Holdings, a Chicago company that owns Ataraxia, as well as Zen Leaf Dispensaries chain, says, "We are dedicated to providing patients and customers with an array of high-quality, safe cannabis products. Zen Leaf stands behind the product it sells and will work with customers over any concerns they have after taking the product home, always following strict product-specific protocols mandated by state regulations." Spreckman says the cannabis in question passed independent testing prior to being packaged, sealed, and entering the state's distribution system to dispensaries. He also says Verano is creating a new in-house lab grow facility in Albion to help spot and prevent problems with quality control, adding another layer to safety to the independent third-party testing its products must undergo. Asked about the results involving products, Chicago-based GTI Industries, which owns grow sites and dispensaries in multi-states, says it strictly abides by state testing regulations in each of our respective markets to ensure the safety and quality of our products. Each of these specific batch numbers reported results within Illinois potency and microbial standards as qualified by state-approved independent third-party testings. PharmaCann, another Chicago cannabis company with retail and cultivation operations in multiple states, also says its products initially met the quality testing standards currently enforced for cannabis products in Illinois at the time of production. The conditions under which the dispensary stored and handled our product or the bulk of the time between the two tests are outside our control or visibility. New York-based Ascend Wellness Holdings, which operates cultivation sites and dispensaries in Illinois and 4 other states, says it's committed to providing safe and trusted products to our patients and customers. Acreage Holdings declined to talk to the Sun-Times. So, State Representative LaShawn Ford of Chicago, who sponsored the law this year overhauling the state's legalization law, says he isn't surprised by the Sun-Times testing results. He says similar alarms have been raised to him about potentially problematic cannabis flower and edibles causing a bad experience for users. Ford says he's looking into the issues in the effort to improve quality of cannabis in Illinois. Good for him. He knows that lawmakers legalized the drug with a promise that it would be sold at dispensaries would be safe. You have to be able to say that we know when it left the grow site that it was safe, he says, and we can narrow the blame. We've got to be able to point the finger. Don't point it too far. What the pre-roll test found. For the Sun-Times Commission tests, reporters bought 9 packages of pre-rolled cannabis joints from 7 dispensaries and 1 chunk of cannabis flower at an 8th dispensary, buying them as any consumer might. The newspaper has hired Orgo Labs in Jefferson Park to perform tests on products. The samples were dropped at the lab on the day of purchase, each labeled with only a number and a letter. The samples were tested for heavy metals, pesticides, and these 5 categories of microbiological contaminants: aerobic bacteria, yeast and mold, chloroform bacteria, biotolerant gram-negative bacteria, and E. coli and salmonella. Wow, that's a lot. They also were tested for mycotoxins, toxic compounds created by molds or fungi, and for potency. One of the 9 pre-roll samples and the lone fresh flower sample passed all of the contaminant test, but 8 of the 9 pre-rolls were found to have 2 or more microbiological contaminants at levels above the Illinois limits. They were produced by 5 major cannabis firms. 4 of the pre-rolls failed for different microbiological tests. None of the samples had detectable levels of E. coli, salmonella, mycotoxins, or 53 types of pesticides. And none of the samples above tested state limits for heavy metals: lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, or chromium. So before I go any further, that's good news on part of it. So the metals not having detectable levels of E. coli, salmonella, mycotoxins, and 53 types of pesticides. That's good news. So there's got to be something from, like I read earlier in the article, of what's going on when they're rolling the pre-rolls, where he said that it could be getting when they grind it and it's getting wet and it produces the mold or the spores. That could be an issue, or transportation, or being held too long, but those are sealed airtight. So something's got to be coming from like when it's being rolled and being then put into the container and sealed.
Well, right. If it's being sealed and there's moisture in there, what they're saying is there's mold spores in the air. So it's in the tube, it's sealed with those mold spores and moisture.
Right.
So my brain is just flying all over with ideas of like humidors. Why couldn't there be a humidor for joints? And then when you buy it, your joint comes out of the humidor into a tube.
And that's the one thing about Illinois and a lot of other states is that it's already
Humidor?
prepackaged.
Humidor. Humidor?
Humidor.
Humidor. Humidor.
Yeah, it's already prepackaged because it has to be because the state.
I know, but
So-
maybe what's more important?
People's health is more
Right.
important. 100%.
In the long run, we want good product to go to people.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that the cultivators aren't capable of making good product, but we're not. It's a whole new world of mass production. That's
Right.
not something that we know. So they have to learn as they move along, and maybe the cannabis humidor experience will be coming to you.
That'd be great.
Like picture like you walk into a vault and then you like click your joint and then it drops down a chute and it goes into the tube. Boom. Oh my gosh, I created a joint vending machine.
I love it.
Frick. Hey, don't steal my idea, anybody. I'm phrasing that. What is that? What do I have to do? Trademark.
Trademark.
Me.
Here's one thing you got to be aware of is the smell of wet dog. Moldy cannabis has long been a problem in Illinois, according to consumers and people who work in the booming legal weed industry. Just in the past week, a former supervisor of PharmaCann's cultivation center in Dwight filed a whistleblower lawsuit in Cook County saying the cannabis company fired him in July because he couldn't stop flagging batches of moldy weed that had been cleared for sale. I think I've read that article. So let's go down a little further here. So just look out for moldy weed. Let's see. Let's talk about a little bit more in this article here. Among problems found elsewhere, they were talking about Arizona, some Canada. They were talking about Nevada had recalled flower. We just read about the state of Michigan in a couple episodes ago, and then they had that recall. So here's something really interesting. In Illinois, microbiological contaminants such as mold, yeast, and various bacteria are measured in colony-forming units per gram, or CFU, with labs culturing them on testing plates to count them. For yeast and mold, Illinois allows up to 1,000 CFU, but in Michigan, they allow up to 100,000 CFUs for recreational weed. The 5 samples that the Sun-Times had tested and which failed for mold and yeast came in at one sample came in over 5,000 CFUs. Another sample came in over 9,500 CFUs. Another sample came in 11,000 CFUs. Another one came in at 18,000. And another one was too numerous to count. That's crazy. That means 4 could have been sold for recreational use in Michigan, and 2 would have been good enough for the medical use there. Some states don't worry much about any, but the most serious strains of mold. California requires labs to test only for, I'm going to butcher this, Aspergillus mold. Connecticut used to limit yeast and mold counts at 10,000 CFUs, but recently loosened that to 1 million, as long as there is no Aspergillus present. Wide variations of potency they were finding. Even in cannabis products consumers buy are free of contaminants. Another issue is potency, in terms of getting less potent cannabis than you are paying for and also possibly getting something far stronger than the label says. Under Illinois, rules-tested potency must be within 85% to 150% of the labeled potency. 5 of the samples in the Sun-Times testing were outside the range, the lab found. 3 came in higher than the label said. 2 came in lower. That's key because consumers buying inhalable cannabis products primarily decide which ones to buy based on how much THC, the main psychoactive component in cannabis. We know that. They contain, according to Kelly Nielsen, Vice President of Insight and Analytics of BDSA, a Colorado cannabis research firm. Nielsen says people buying cannabis flower and pre-rolls know that its potency may vary, unlike those buying edibles who expect more precise dosing. But Preston, the cannabis podcast host, who used medical cannabis since 2018, doesn't buy that. How are you supposed to learn what a serving size is if we aren't provided the accurate numbers, he says. Imagine this was happening with alcohol or other drugs and medications. I will say when it comes to beer, you do have a slight range you're allowed to be at, lower or higher than the alcohol percentage on the bottle. Very, very tiny, though, like really tiny. The biggest potency variations in the Sun-Times test found in a gelato pre-roll sold at Dispensary 33 in Westtown. The THC was at 18.9%, but the Sun-Times testing found that it was only 11.6%. Oh, yikes. Dog walkers, which we like, they did a test on them, had total label of 23.92%, but the test found it was only 15.7%. How's that that Maury, that show Maury when he talks about the DNA testing?
You are not the father.
Yeah, but so this is not your THC level. This is not your THC level. So McRae says cannabis flower can have some spots with higher concentrations of cannabinoids and others which lower levels. So when it's ground up for rolling, it's possible one joint gets the weaker portion of the weed and the next gets the stronger part, he says. That's just the nature of the product, he says. The potency on the label is probably an approximation. So they also promising now there's going to be better safety and quality, and what they're saying is it's going to come up to where now they're going to, with all this extra stuff that these dispensaries or cultivators are going to have to do, with the higher taxes means they're going to come higher prices. Great. So we're going to be paying $100 for an eighth eventually. So that was the article. I suggest you guys go on and read it if you're really interested in it. It was the Chicago Sun-Times back in December 10th, just about 10 days ago. And it was written by Stephanie Zimmerman and Tom Schuba. Great article. I suggest you read it if you want more information. When we were growing up as kids, probably even up to today, what was always talked about cannabis being?
It's the gateway drug.
Yeah.
Right? It's part of the DARE program.
Yep.
I think they've revised that.
I think so too.
But I've got an article here about the brief history of the false myth about cannabis as a gateway drug. Several scientific studies have refuted the idea that cannabis consumption would lead to using hard drugs like cocaine and heroin, but the belief is still prevalent in the collective imagination. Even U.S. President Joe Biden used to think that cannabis was a gateway drug, but he has changed his position over time. When discussing cannabis, those who oppose legalization claim the gateway drug theory, a hypothesis in which the use of cannabis would lead to the use of hard drugs such as cocaine and heroin. This assumption has also fueled the idea that there is no distinction between soft and hard drugs. Even today, the concept of the absence of difference between soft and hard drugs is one of the main reasons why governments do not legalize cannabis. The gateway drug theory dates back to the 1930s. Mr. Harry Anslinger, head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, campaigned against cannabis after actively participating in the campaign against alcohol, which remained illegal in the United States of America from 1920 to 1933. In that period, Anslinger created a campaign against cannabis. He used the media as propaganda to spread that idea that cannabis was a harmful substance that led people to commit It led people to commit criminal acts of violence. Anslinger's efforts with the Bureau of Narcotics were the reason marijuana became a word known by Americans all over the country. That word, marijuana, spelled with a H-U-A-N-A, there's a lot of back and forth about where it really became a word. There's some stories about in like Mexican history that it was like an abbreviation of a man's first and last name, that it had some association with cannabis. But really back in history, they called marijuana cannabis. It wasn't until like all of these negative connotations started being tied to it that it became marijuana, the bad thing, right? When making public appearances and crafting propaganda films such as Reefer Madness, Anslinger specifically used the term marijuana when campaigning against the plant, adding to the development of the herb's new foreign identity. Cannabis was no longer the plant substance found in medicines and consumed unanimously by Americans all over the country. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics collected a series of crime reports claiming that the trigger behind those dramatic events was the use of cannabis. The so-called Gore files reported stories of rape, violence, and murder by people who had consumed cannabis. The propaganda against cannabis perpetrated by Anslinger led to the enacting of the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. The law did not expressly prohibit the consumption, sale, or cultivation of cannabis plants, but it made creating a business impossible. LaGuardia, the mayor of New York City from 1934 to 1945, opposed the propaganda of Anslinger's Federal Bureau of Narcotics. In 1938, LaGuardia created a commission of inquiry made up of doctors, professors, and researchers to understand the real effects of cannabis on health. The study, released in 1944, highlighted the absence of correlation between addiction and cannabis use, finding no relationship between cannabis consumption and episodes of violence and criminality, and no cannabis-induced switch to hard drug use. Anslinger's reaction to the LaGuardia report was not long in coming. He called the report unscientific and sued Mayor LaGuardia, the New York Academy of Medicine, and members who took part in the study. Moreover, Anslinger halted all cannabis research between 1944 and 45. He also commissioned the American Medical Association, which opposed the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, to publish a study reflecting government positions. It's insane. How did this guy have so much control over this? In 1972, former U.S. President Richard Nixon appointed politician Raymond Schaefer as president of the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse, also known as the Schaefer Commission. The commission's goal was to evaluate the real effects of cannabis and a potential reschedule of cannabis within the Controlled Substance Act of 1970, which entered into force in 1971. This study's results were entitled Marijuana, A Signal of Misunderstanding, debunked the gateway drug theory. Still, it did not lead to rescheduling of cannabis. So you had the president, you had mayors, you had the board of physicians. I mean, like, everybody was against Anslinger. And for whatever reason, Anslinger still got to run this show.
Yeah, back in the 1930s, yeah.
And he turned what was a promising medicine into a crime.
That's why I don't like him.
Jerk off. Well, although the LaGuardia report and the Schaefer Commission debunked the gateway drug theory, the studies of Kendall and DuPont tried to back up the theory. The studies of the American sociologist Dennis Kendall focused on the use of legal and illegal drugs. Through longitudinal studies, Kendall, K-A-N-D-E-L, Kendall, sorry, I'm a little high. The studies that he formulated in 1975, the hypothesis that narcotic substances were triggered by lethal drugs such as alcohol and tobacco. The study observed that alcohol and tobacco were necessary intermediates between non-use and cannabis, whereas 27% of high school students who smoke and drink progress to marijuana within 5 to 6 month follow-up period. Only 2% of those who had not used any illegal substance do so. Marijuana, in turn, is the crucial step on the way to other illicit drugs, the study read. Give me a break. It's so aggravating. In his book, Getting Tough on Gateway Drugs, A Guide for the Family in 1984, I'd love to see that one. Probably has illustrations on, like, the sit-down at the dinner table, right? Ugh. Robert DuPont, an American psychiatrist, laid the socio-psychological foundation for cannabis as a gateway drug. DuPont described cannabis as one of the most dangerous drugs. According to DuPont, anyone taking cannabis will almost certainly switch to hard drugs. Both Kendall and DuPont relied on statistics and that hard drug users also had experience with cannabis use. Like, just because you use cannabis, that's it. You're going to crack. Ugh. But their theories don't find causality between cannabis use and hard drug use. Most people who use, I'm really frustrated about this. Because there were so many people fighting against it, and they just kept winning. And what a mess it made of the world of cannabis, and just everything. Most people who use cannabis do not use other hard drugs. The National Institute on Drug Abuse said that most people who use marijuana do not use harder substances. So this is the National Institute on Drug Abuse. They might know a few things. Instead, the Institute supposed that people more vulnerable to drug taking are more likely to start with readily available substances, such as marijuana, tobacco, or alcohol, and their subsequent social interactions with other other people who use drugs increase their chances of trying other drugs. So it's situational, right? According to the U.S. think tank RAND Corporation, that's the Research and Development Corporation, what triggers people to use hard drugs is not cannabis, but the individual opportunities and the unique inclinations of people. Another idea that gives a different version of cannabis as a gateway drug is the theory of common responsibility. In a study, pharmaceutical science professor Michael M. Vanyukov stated that many factors contribute to a person's predisposition to become addicted to drugs. A person can consume cannabis, tobacco, and alcohol without necessarily switching to the intake of harder drugs. Cannabis as a gateway drug seems to be a hypothesis based on simplistic and fallacious logical processes. If cannabis were a gateway drug, we would expect to see far more hard drug users than there are. According to the World Health Organization, 2.5% of the world population, about 147 million people, consume cannabis globally.
Hell yeah.
Compared to 0.2% of those who consume cocaine and opiates. But most importantly, recent studies position cannabis as a getaway drug. In other words, cannabis is seen as a substance capable of removing people from the use of hard drugs and playing a substitute role for opioids.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Getaway drug.
For instance, a 2017 Canadian study found that cannabis is perceived as an effective treatment for several conditions, such as treating pain and mental health. The results show high consumption of cannabis as a substitute for prescription drugs, in particular opioids, benzodiazepines, and antidepressants. Other studies report similar dynamics. Cannabis seems to have a beneficial effect from reducing opioid use. However, further research is still needed. In the meantime, thousands of scientific reports have contributed to debunking the assumption of cannabis as a gateway drug. I'm going to bang my gavel.
Get on your soapbox.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard our whole lives about cannabis being a gateway drug, and I've never believed it because I've said this before on the show. I've never smoked cannabis and wanted to try something else.
Right.
I've never wanted to go shoot heroin. I've never wanted to go smoke crack after.
And you don't feel dependent on but that's the same thing too. Like they're saying with addiction is addiction. It doesn't necessarily mean what you're addicted to. Some things you're addicted to are less harmful to you. It doesn't mean that they can't be destructive in your life, right?
Right.
Like people are addicted to exercise. People are addicted to food. People are addicted to self-abuse.
Some people are addicted to jumping out of a plane.
Yes, adrenaline. I mean, there's a lot of forms of addiction.
Right.
Right. And so I think we've talked about before, there's theories that the disposition of being addicted or being an addictive personality is something that you're innately born to. You just have that characteristic.
Right.
And then what that manifests into can be a variety of things, good or bad, right?
Right.
Some people are just addicted to work. So I don't even know where I'm going.
It's okay. I know what you're going at. I get it.
Oh, weed. Weed is not really going to make you addicted. I don't really... I think there's a lot of people who habitually use it. It's part of their lifestyle. But if you said you can't use it for a week, they'd just be mad. Fuck, that's stupid. But I don't think that they couldn't go... it's not like they'd be dope sick.
Right.
They're not...
Oh, man.
They're not going to be doubled over in pain because they don't have it.
I know.
So, anyway...
But that was good because, like I said, I've said it before. I've never believed cannabis to be a gateway drug, so I thought that was a great article. Visa warns against misuses of cashless ATMs used by cannabis retailers to skirt restrictions. I actually like the cashless ATM you get to use in dispensaries now, like where you go in and you just put your debit card in, and they round up. Say if your order was $58. Mm-hmm. They'll round it up to $60 and give you the $2 cash back. So it's a cash. So basically, you're just using your debit card to pay. You're not getting any cash. It's like using an ATM machine, but you're not getting any cash.
It dispenses the money to the cashier, not to you.
100%. So, but Visa's saying that it's still part of the banking problem with cannabis, and it's screwing things up. And they're saying that they're gonna start bearing down on this because of the laws. It's still federally illegal. And what
I wonder if there was just an ATM that dispensed the money to you, and you go to the counter and purchase.
Well, there is dispenser. All dispensaries have an
ATM,
a cash
right.
ATM.
But maybe that's what they just have to stick to. They can't do this cashless
Yeah, but it's so
version.
yeah. But then you get charged $3 or $4 on your card. I get it, but this saves a lot of time. It saves.
Maybe the dispensary should pay the bank fee.
Yeah, that's true.
Or people just have to go to the bank.
That's actually a great idea.
Yeah, right.
So hopefully this banking. They were trying to get it passed through the last bill that the House and Senate passed for. They were trying to sneak it in, and it didn't get in. So kind of sucks. So hopefully they can fix this soon and get this federally legal, so people don't have to worry anymore. Anxiety.
Yeah.
It's pretty big out there in the world. More so, we didn't hear a lot about anxiety when we were younger.
Oh my God, no! Nobody.
I didn't start hearing the word anxiety probably until I was like in my late 30s, like as much as I'm hearing about it now.
Like you knew what anxiety meant, but people, like you would, if you felt anxious and you could identify that you felt anxious, the way that we talked about it was different than like anxiety, like a disorder. It was just more like, oh, I'm just anxious right now.
Right.
Or we didn't identify our feelings that way. It was just different. It's everywhere.
So what's the perfect amount to use?
Yeah. Well, cannabis can be used for anxiety. And if you smoke pot, it can help. Or if you have edibles, whatever. And this article is saying that there turns out to be a perfect amount to use when you consume for anxiety. Sorry, that took a long time to get that title out.
That weed's got you kicking.
I'm circling around with ideas.
Speaking of weed, I'm going to take another hit.
So this is a firsthand story. This journalist is writing about themselves, and the person is saying, I smoke pot. I smoke it for 3 reasons. I smoke it to help manage my crippling anxiety and panic disorders. I smoke it to help get me to sleep, and I smoke it to have the best sex of my life. I don't smoke pot because I'm a lazy stoner whose only passion is Doritos. I don't smoke it to seem cool or get totally out of my mind like some wild co-ed. I do it because it's one of the very few things that can alleviate some of the major anxiety symptoms from which I suffer. While I know that there are other people who enjoy using cannabis suppositories to help loosen up.
Alabama.
Yeah, we're going to the sex side. Hang on. I'm pretty old-fashioned when it comes to how I introduce cannabis into my body. I use a vaporizer. Down there?
Are you confused?
Why? She was talking about suppositories, and then she's talking about a vaporizer. Like your hoo-hoo's not going to take a puff. There is a guy I now follow on Instagram who smokes cannabis. He vaporizes through his nostril.
Oh, really?
Because he had oral surgery, and so his dentist said he couldn't smoke because you can get dry socket from having your wisdom teeth pulled. So he's like, but I still, like, he's a smoker. Like, that's his consumption method. And so he decided to try it through his nose, and it worked. So
good for him.
Now he's like insta-famous for smoking weed through his nose.
Smoking doinks through his nose.
Pretty funny. Well, anyway, I think this person is not talking about vaporizing through their hoo-hoo. Somehow I'm just going to move on. Anyway. My reasons for smoking cannabis, again, this is coming from the journalist, are not unique. A Yahoo News Marist survey found 37% of participants cited consuming for its stress-relieving benefits, compared to 19% who turn to weed for pain relief, 16% who use it to have fun, and 3% who report consuming it for its effectiveness as both a sleep aid and as a sexual booster. I avoided smoking cannabis for a really long time. A huge part of why I avoided it was for the same reason I have avoided other illegal recreation drugs. Because I was convinced that the drug would trigger a panic attack in me, or worst case scenario, make me so anxious and fraught that I would never feel normal again. A lot of people smoke weed just to relax, and I know a fair amount of anxious people who credit medical cannabis with helping them live with and manage their symptoms. That said, I have also heard horror stories about my anxious friends having serious panic attacks after smoking weed. Everyone talks about finding a happy medium, managing your anxiety without triggering a panic attack. But to me, when it comes to my brain's chemistry, it seemed a little foolish to play with a guessing game when it came to how much weed I should be ingesting. I wanted science, I wanted hard answers, and eventually, with the advice of my therapist and a licensed doctor, I realized that trying a low dose of cannabis medicinally might hold the answer for me. I wasn't sure what low dose meant, but luckily, because I saw a doctor, the numbers were taken care of for me. I keep up with the news about pot for anxiety, though. Lately, there's been a lot of more legitimate scientific research about weed and how it can affect the anxious mind. A recent study gave different groups varying amounts of weed and put them in a high-stress 2-hour interview environment. And here's what they found. Compared to those who took the placebo, the 7.5 milligram group experienced less distress in the course of the test and were less likely to view it as threatening or challenging. The stress they experienced also didn't last long. Things didn't go so well for the 12.5 milligram cohort. They reported increased negative mood before and throughout the test. They were also more disposed to find the task threatening and challenging even before they had begun. They even demonstrated impaired performance on the test itself. So there you have it. If you want a real number to hold on to, 7.5 milligrams of THC is all that is required to make a person feel relaxed.
What was that again?
She's saying, like, because of this one study, 7.5 milligrams of THC is the exact number. So, like, a low dose.
Yeah, it's a microdose,
right.
I would say. I mean, 5 milligram gummies are good. They get me.
Right.
They do the job at night.
To put that number in real terms, smoking half an average-sized joint, a person will consume between 33 and 39 milligrams of THC. To break it down, just take a couple puffs, and then you won't necessarily go overboard. So, yeah, a couple puffs. For 7.5 milligrams, maybe one puff. If you're a person like me who loves the positive effects of cannabis on your anxiety and your sex life, it turns out that less THC is absolutely more. Obviously, this is just one study, but if you've held back from pot as an option like I did, you might find news like this super exciting. So,
nice.
Yeah, cool.
St. Louis mayor signs bill to decriminalize cannabis possession and cultivate up to 6 plants. Go, St. Louis mayor. Now the whole state needs to do that and make it even do the whole state. Come on, governor of Missouri, do it. Do it. You legalize it, fix it. We all been hearing about the supply chain crisis. It's being felt in the cannabis industry too, with vapes, pre-rolls, and could possibly be affected soon with this as the global supply chain encounters massive shortages. Getting basic materials like ceramic, stainless steel, and computer chips from China has gotten difficult and is now about to hit the U.S. cannabis industry. And this was reported by Bloomberg. The cannabis industry has so far been shielded from supply chain woes because most of it is hyper-local. But state-specific supply chains can only protect the industry for so long. This gentleman, Nude Dumas de Rowley, CEO of Blink Group, he says he believes the issues will go on at least until the end of May. A cannabis vaping hardware firm told Bloomberg, and it's not just vape devices, added DeRulli. Raw materials, LED lights for grow houses, and chips, all of it comes from China. We're trying to order ahead. We're not paying more, but we're paying up front. Also, we've begun to source domestic pools of inventory, he said. When the supply chain impacts begin to be felt, they'll hit products like packaged pre-rolled joints and vape cartridges more than raw flower, said Josh Crane, Vice President of Operations of Forefront Ventures, a large-scale cannabis cultivation and manufacturing company. So be prepared. Stock up a little bit now. I'm not saying buy toilet paper and fucking, what's the other one?
Hand wipes.
Hand wipes and toilet paper, and don't go buy like 20 rolls
Paper towels.
Paper towels. Just make sure you just have what you're going to need till May. How about that? Okay? Montana lawmakers approved cannabis rules ahead of January 1st, launch of legal sales. Like we talked about on a couple episodes ago about Montana, they were fighting on this. Well, it looks like January 1st is going to be the launch of legal sales. Good for you, Montana. Illinois announces $45 million in cannabis-funded grants to support community reinvestment. This is part of the reinvest and renew the R3 program, which is great. So they're saying $45 million. It's 25% of the cannabis tax dollars be put in that fund. So $45 million. Hopefully it goes to good use. Good for you, Illinois. Pfizer, who's made the vaccine, is getting into the cannabis game with a $6.7 billion arena pharma deal. If you didn't think they were going to get into the game sooner or later, you're fooling yourselves. Excuse me, everybody. So they're all going to get in the game. Big money. Paying $6.5 billion for a company is no joke. So Virginia Legislative Joint Commission recommends speeding up cannabis sales launch by a year. Good for you, Virginia. They want to get it done by January 2023. How about do it in the summer of 2022? Move it up more. Get it done. Let's go, Virginia. People waiting over there to smoke some good weed. GOP lawmakers call on Biden and Harris to end silence on cannabis legalization. They've been hitting them hard lately. There's a ton of articles about this saying that the president has not held up his bargain. He seemed to forget about it, and I understand they got a lot on their plate with the new variant and everything that's going on in the world. I understand that, but stick to your gun, Biden, and what you said you were going to do. At least decriminalize it, get it off to Schedule 1, declassify it, and move on. Okay, at least do that for the people, for the cannabis community, and for the 40,000 prisoners that are in prison still, and everybody else that's got a record for cannabis. Expunge all that, get it done. At least do that, and then let the states handle the rest. Don't worry, you'll get your money. This is big news. Ohio recreational cannabis campaign submits 206 signatures to the state to legalize cannabis in there for rec, and they only needed 132,887, and they got to be valid. So if they get at least the 132,000 out of the 206 that are valid, man, we could see it being put on the docket, and that's going to be great for Ohio, for all my friends out there, and my burners, stoners, and potheads. Man, let's go, Ohio. I want to go in your dispensaries when I'm out there and buy some weed. You like wine,
I like wine.
right?
I had too much of it this week.
Yeah, you did. You did have a little bit too much.
I was pretty buzzy.
You like weed, too?
I like weed.
What happens? Well, we should have tested out, but you were really wine.
I had too much wine.
Yeah, you had too much wine.
I didn't even smoke that
we
night.
we do drink wine on the show sometimes and have our weed, and I actually enjoy it. I think it's great. But what happens when you combine the two?
Well, there is a lot that happens. Wine and cannabis have been enjoyed by people around the world for thousands of years, even in periods when both were illegal. Both are used to relax at the end of the day, to take the edge off, as a social experience, and both have complex smells and flavors that make them ripe for pairing with food and each other. Though alcohol and cannabis affect us in different ways, they both alter our perceptions and are considered psychoactives. The high from cannabis results from an interaction with the human body's endocannabinoid system. Alcohol enters the bloodstream and makes its way to the brain, which slows us down and causes us to feel drunk. Both are also biphasic in a way that affect us, meaning a small dose can have a different effect than a large one. With both alcohol and cannabis, having a little can make us feel great, but imbibe too much in either and you will wind up feeling terrible. While feeling high and feeling drunk are admittedly different experiences, they can have some overlap in symptoms, such as feelings of relaxation, euphoria, reduction in pain, and sleepiness. Both alcohol and cannabis are used by some to self-medicate physical and mental pain, from a sore back to anxiety and depression. As a result, both substances can be addictive. Studies suggest that 1 in 8 drinkers are alcoholics, whereas fewer than 1 in 10 cannabis users can develop a disorder. On the plus side, both cannabis and wine, red more than white, have been found to contain antioxidants and have anti-inflammatory properties. This means ending the day with a glass of red and a few puffs of weed could even have some positive effects like preventing Alzheimer's disease. There is a widespread belief that drinking red wine is good for the heart, but the truth is, no research exists that has proven a cause and effect link between alcohol and better heart health, unfortunately. Just don't overdo it, because alcohol and cannabis can both cause hangovers the next day. Alcohol's hangovers are more intense and more dangerous. However, with symptoms including...
You had a hangover the other day.
I did. And like dehydration hangover.
Yeah.
Headache and dehydrated. with symptoms including headaches, dehydration, nausea, dizziness, and vomiting, while a cannabis hangover is generally just a feeling of fatigue and brain fog. You're like, oh, is it, what day is it? You're not quite sure. Sometimes you feel high still in the morning, right? Wine, like all alcoholic beverages, is classified as a depressant, meaning it slows brain and motor function. Cannabis, on the other hand, cannot be classified into a single category. It can actually act as a depressant, stimulant, or hallucinogen depending on the strain, dose, and the individual consuming it, as cannabis affects people differently and in different ways. Chronic users of alcohol are at risk of developing brain damage, liver disease, heart problems, and a long list of possible cancers. Alcohol can kill you in a number of ways, including overdosing from alcohol poisoning. There can be long-term negative side effects of cannabis use too, but nobody's ever died from consuming too much of it. Connoisseurs of wine and cannabis alike are sure to have their favorite preferred types, whether it's Pinot Noir or Purple Haze. Wine and weed both have incredibly complex and diverse flavors, tannins, and aromas, depending on the type of strain or variety of grape, and even where the plants are grown. Both substances are full of different phytochemicals, such as terpenes and flavonoids, that produce various smells and tastes. Which phytochemicals are present and their ratios will largely influence the overall sensory impact of wine and cannabis. Wine will look and taste dramatically different if it's a red, white, or a blend, whether it was made in France or California or somewhere else in the world, and how it was treated during the fermentation process. Just as there are hundreds of different kinds of wine, there are also thousands of different kinds of cannabis strains. Each strain has its own unique chemical profile of cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, and other phytochemicals that work together to create its unique flavor, smell, look, and effects. Its flavor and effects can also become altered depending on how it's cured and whether it was processed into an oil, hash, tincture, or remains as a dried flower bud. Considering both substances have such complex depth and variety in terms of flavor, combining cannabis and wine is becoming an increasingly popular choice. In addition to increasingly popular weed and food pairings, wine and weed pairings events have been popping up all over in places where cannabis is legal. When paired together, different combinations can either accentuate existing flavors, for example, pairing a citrusy Chardonnay with lemon Kush, or they may complement each other in a unique way. Pairing a bold, dry Merlot with a puff of a sweet and tangy orange Kush will lighten the heaviness of the wine and could even make it taste a bit fruity, like a sangria. The pairing possibilities truly are endless, so get creative and experiment. There are no hard and fast rules to pairing wine and weed. As long as you enjoy it, then it's a good pairing. Just remember to start slow and don't overdo it, as there is an increased risk of becoming nauseous and getting spins when you're combining both alcohol and cannabis. Some researchers are looking into whether alcohol increases the absorption of cannabis's main psychoactive ingredient, THC. As long as you remember to consume in moderation, combining wine and weed can be a highly enjoyable experience.
I think it is if it's done right. I like wine and weed.
Mm-hmm.
I like drinking a rosé with a little bit of weed. It's nice. Just be careful out there. Like Mrs. Weedman said, don't overdo it. Start low and go slow. Mrs. Weedman.
Mr. Weedman.
International news.
Bring it. Malta.
Smoke one from Malta.
Oh, okay. I can do that.
Smoke one from Malta.
Smoke.
Malta officially legalizes cannabis over the weekend. The president's signature becoming the first Europe EU country to end cannabis prohibition. Just days after Malta's parliament approved the bill to legalize cannabis, President George Vella signed the legalization into law on Saturday. Woo-woo! Malta. This makes Malta the first European country to enact the reform.
Go Malta.
And we talked about what the laws were going to be in the last episode. I'm so fucking proud of Malta. And if you don't know where Malta is,
look it up.
I know where it is. Take a look at the boot of Italy. Underneath Sicily, straight south of Sicily, is a little beautiful country called Malta.
It's an island?
It's an island.
Oh.
I want to go there now.
Yeah.
I want to smoke in Malta. I want to find somebody that's
I need
going
to
to
look
grow
at a
their own
map.
cannabis, and I want to smoke with you. Malta. Malta, I'm so fucking proud of you. Oh, so happy, Malta. Good job. In Italy, a lack of clear, complete regulations holding back Italian operators when growing hemp. They're feeling very, very. They're saying the hemp sector, they don't feel protected or guaranteed in their work, despite the fact that they are called to assume the same responsibilities and the same burdens as operators linked to other production sectors. They're also feeling that the hemp growth there, they can use the stalks for processing and research and doing a lot better with it. So come on, Italy. There's a little section in Italy right now. There's 50 hectoliters that they can grow some hemp in, and they want to use it for biodiversity for the environment. They want to make biodegradable products to help the environment. So I'm super stoked. Hopefully they can get this going. The more hemp, the better, because hemp can save the world. Increased demand and regulation reforms allows domestic cannabis industry to blossom. In a secret garden in southern Tasmania, 3,000 cannabis plants sit, bathe in golden light, ready for harvest. Workers wearing hazmats and harnesses methodically snip their way through the crop, sending piles of pungent flowers heads trundling down fluorescent hallways to the drying room. This is an industry of the precise of major expansion, where consumers' demand is rising and regulation is being streamlined in both the farm and in the pharmacy. They're saying Australia too is like one of the hottest areas right now for cannabis. Overseeing the harvest is Grace Lamont, a genetic research assistant in Tasmanian Botanics. Every one of these plants is a clone, and that is how we're controlling the consistency of the output. So they should all have a very close range of cannabinoid content, she says. They're getting daily watering with nutrient mix that they have light for 12 hours a day. With 40 staff and plans to hire 60 more, this is no backyard operation. Confidence in the future of Australia's domestic cannabis market has companies spending big. Tens of millions of dollars have been poured into the facilities at Tasmanian Botanics, which will soon begin production in a greenhouse that's 2 stories high and about the size of a soccer field. Holy schmoly. A lot of hoops to jump through. However, many of these rules and regulations are being streamlined, according to Josie Hamlet, the Compliance and Logistics Officer at Tasmanian Botanics. We definitely have a lot of hoops to jump through working in the industry that we have to do, particularly in some cases when federal and state legislation doesn't align, she says. But there's been a lot of reforms. It makes our life easier, but it definitely makes the patient's life easier too. And she says that it feels like the government is definitely on board. Peter Fielding knows all about jumping through hoops. He was diagnosed with Asperger's cancer in 2019 and struggled to get access to medical cannabis. Try finding a practitioner who can prescribe it legally. It's still a problem, he says. All I can describe is the miracle relief of pain. It's so much less evasive than opiates. I was given 4 months. Now I now have up to 23 months and say about 5 days, now that I'm counting. Healthcare professionals remain hesitant. Almost all cannabinoid products are unapproved therapeutic goods. This means the government body in charge of medicines in Australia, the Therapeutic Good Administration, can't vouch for the safety, quality, or efficiency. This helps explain why many doctors and pharmacists are hesitant to prescribe medical cannabis, according to Dr. Yvonne Bonomo, a physician and researcher at the Australian Centre of Cannabinoid Clinical and Research Excellence. Many medical professionals haven't gone through that usual path of learning about how cannabinoids work, what you prescribe for them, how you prescribe for them, what you should be monitoring for in terms of adverse events and side effects, she says. What about recreational use? Tasmanian Botanics CEO Dan Howard is used to cite the smell of cannabis. He has recently moved from Canada, where he can legally buy the product for medicinal and recreational purposes. From the medical market evolved the adult use market, and that is how proliferated across Canada with thousands and thousands of stores and hundreds of producers, he says. How Howard believes Australia is heading in a similar direction. If you think back to 10 years ago globally, it wasn't legal anywhere. It was a narcotic drug viewed like heroin or cocaine in a lot of countries, he says. And now legalization is proliferating around the world. It's not an if, it's a when. So go Australia, our friends from down under down there. Get that legalized, rec and med. What are the top stoner movies of 2021, Mrs. Weedman?
Well, I have a list of the top 63 stoner movies and miniseries brought to you in 2021. I'm going to go over 3 from each category that they offer.
Can I say who that's by?
Yeah.
Good friend of ours, Celeb Stoner Magazine, rated us one of the top podcasts in the world. So this is his article, man. We admire the hell out of you, and we thank you for letting us read off your shit.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring you top 3 in each category, but we will post a link to the article, so you'll be able to look them all up. So you've got something to watch over your holidays. Let's see. Stoner comedies. Don't Look Up. This literally just gives the titles. I don't know anything about any of them. Habit and How It Ends. Then we have druggy dramas. Akila's Escape, Cherry, and City of Lies. Music drama biopics. Love Spreads, Respect, and Shoplifters of the World. Druggy documentaries. Bobby Joe, Under the Influence. Crack, Cocaine, Corruption and Conspiracy, and Jacinta. Music documentaries. Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell.
I got to watch that one yet. It's in my saves.
Bitchin', The Sound and Fury of Rick James, and Bob Dylan, Odds and Ends. Miscellaneous documentary, Roadrunner, a film, we need to see this, about Anthony Bourdain. Miniseries, 1971, the year that music changed everything. Cocaine Cowboys, The Kings of Miami. We watched that.
Yeah, that was good.
That was good. Demi Lovato, Dancing with the Devil. And I pulled the 4th one from this one too, because we're currently watching it, Dope Sick, and it is pretty impactful. So that's it. We will again post the link for that article so you can see some more options.
Yeah, and check out our friend at Celeb Stoner Magazine. He's a great writer.
Please do.
There's a cannabis company planning cannabis-infused whiskey with Breckenridge Distillery, a leading distilled spirits platform located in Breckenridge, Colorado. Crazy. Mixing weed and whiskey. What do you think about that? You're a whiskey drinker.
Yeah. They're going to infuse
probably
the
taste.
weed.
They probably do taste first, I bet. Because it's illegal to...
As a resin or...
I didn't really
I wonder
read.
what they're making out of it.
Breckenridge Distillery joins this company as cornerstones of the company's beverage alcohol segment and further diversifies its net revenue. Not really...
drink, maybe.
Yeah, it's really going to be a drink.
Tincture.
They're not really talking about... They're talking about more just adding the flavors to it at first because you can't mix alcohol and weed. It's illegal still. So
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
let's see.
We'll see what kind of botanical terpenes they'll add to whiskey and make it taste like weed.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Because there's some beers out there that have used hemp in it and they've used flavoring and stuff like that. There's some craft breweries that have done that before. So, drum roll, please. Top 8 cannabis strains of 2021. First one, GMO cookies. And this is by Leafly, by the way. So, and how they rank theirs is by stuff they try and people that go on Leafly and rank and take a look at stuff. So, but let's talk about this. And then I'm going to give you the final one, the one they said was the strain of the year. So, GMO cookies, number 1. Peanut butter breath, which I have some seeds to grow of that. Excited. Cereal milk. I never heard of that one before.
I've heard of that.
You had it?
Mm-hmm.
No. Apple fritter. Kush mints. London pound cake. Grease monkey. MAC, which stands for Miracle Alien Cookies. And now let's go to... I didn't read all about them. You can go on Leafly and look it up. But I want to read about the one strain that is the 2021 strain of the year from Leafly. And it is Do-si-dos. Bye-bye.
That's like the Girl Scout cookies.
Yes.
Do-si-dos.
And this is what they say about that. Cannabis lovers do the happy dance. The Leafly strain of the year 2021 is Do-si-do. From coast to coast, in the streets and online, Do-si-do showed off this year. This flashy, pungent, maximum strength indica hybrid cross of OG Kush and Girl Scout cookies earned our highest annual award after an independent review of search trends, menu prevalence awards, and expert analysis. So, why is Do-si-do's Leafly strain of the year? We gave Do-si-do's leaf the highest honor in 2021 because with deep purple leaves sleeted with potent resin, Do-si resets the bar for bag appeal. Its rowdy fuels, smells, and big flavors last long after the joints burn. Do-si's room-spinning effects can sit down some of the highest tolerance smokers. It's a dream to grow, so growers and breeders love it. Do-si-dos and its crosses have won, placed, or showed in pot contests every year since 2016. A Do-si took Best Visual at a Massachusetts Cultivators Cup in September. It became a top 20 most viewed strain on Leafly in 2021. In its short lifetime, Do-si has become a living legend. At the ripe age of 9 years old, it waves the banner of modern OG Kushes in 2021. And with exciting offsprings like Moonbow and Slurricane, ready to carry on its legacy in 2022, Do-si's stud status is secure. Yes, there are newer, more hyped strains, but we picked Do-si-do because it's clear, not a flash in the pan. Do-si-do's creators, Archive Seeds in Portland, Oregon, has cemented their place in the $18.3 billion legal cannabis industry. So good for them. Do-si's flowers look icy and trichome, set off by tight, dense, deep purple leaves. Good Do-si-do smacks your nose with gas, then caresses it with a hint of velvety, sweet, dank grape and cookie spice, and a funky dankness dubbed the breath. The smell carries over to the taste. The cultivator strains the palate with fuel, said Ted Liddy, founder of Alien Labs in California. Limonene, carotene, and linalool comprise its top terpenes. You get a rocket ride high and then land into a couch lock with the maximum THC indica hybrid. So, Do-si-do gets the fucking high, said Liddy, who has a top shelf tolerance and has been smoking for decades. I'll call it stoned. You get that medicated in the couch feeling. So you can go on and read more. They tell about the genetics and where it came from and stuff like that. So, but good for Do-si-do and all the winners on Leafly. Now my top picks, just what Leafly says. So go on and read about it. So I think it was kind of cool that they do that every year. And good for Do-si-do. Mrs. Weedman.
Yes.
It's almost the holiday season.
It is.
Hey, everybody. Whatever you celebrate out there in the world, we love you. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. If you already celebrated Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate or don't celebrate, we love you all out there. Have a great, great holiday season. Be safe. Be kind. Be loved. Peace be with you all. As Paulie always says, smoke smart. Puff, puffing away.
Puff, puff, pass.